Here's what's coming up on today's show.
Knowing your numbers. And that's something that when you come to see us at the office, we help you to quantify. For a lot of people, they've never done that before.
Welcome to the How Money Works podcast with Craig and Jennifer Moser of Maestro Wealth Advisors, serving you throughout the Triad of North Carolina for more than 30 years.
It's time once again for another edition of How Money Works with the great team from Maestro Wealth Advisors. And you can get yourself onto the calendar by simply calling 336-448-1086 for your consultation and review with the team serving you here in the Triad. Craig is here once again, financial advisor and certified financial planner. And of course, Miss Jennifer's here. She's a certified exit planning advisor. And they got a whole team waiting to help you. So get on the calendar at 336-448-1086. And this week we're going to talk about, between the ages of 55 and 65, and we'll dive into that in just a minute. But Craig, what's going on, buddy? How are you?
Well, before we go on, we do have a new number. I know, we have a new number to share. So people were saying, what's that number again? So we said, we're going to make it easy. So you can call 833-RETIRE-WELL, and that will get us as well. So 833-RETIRE-WELL, and you'll reach us here at Maestro Wealth Advisors to serve you here in the Piedmont.
Nice and easy. Yep. 833-RETIRE-WELL. Okay. Yep. We'll try again. Craig, how are you, buddy?
I'm great. We're starting to get into baseball season here for the little guys, and we're teeing up the bats and the gloves, and it's kind of fun to be able to get that bunch out there. And it's funny watching some of them. They strike out like a dozen times when you throw it to them. Then all of a sudden you hit one, and you got to have a celebration.
It's exciting.
Yeah, but it is. It's fun. Everybody did it. I remember playing that when I was young. Baseball. It was so much fun.
Well, that's good. And Miss Jennifer, how are you? Now, besides the new phone number, what else is going on?
Nothing, just enjoying with being with the grandkids. We've had an opportunity to have a lot more time with them, seeing them in the sports, listening to Naomi, practice her piano. I remember brought me back to when I was growing up, and my parents had to endure me on the violin and clarinet, and my brother on the clarinet, and the other on the trumpet. So, we were in the country. Well, we're kind of in the country too. So neighbors weren't offended by our practicing.
Well, that's good. And all that stuff really is part of the part of the process, the retirement process. You guys aren't retired yet, but those are things that are on people's radars, right? Whenever you're thinking about what do we want to do in retirement, as we're getting closer, so on and so forth, we want to spend more time with them. So with that in mind, guys, let's talk about the 10-year lead up to retirement, 55 to 65. Maybe you've started early, maybe you haven't, but I guess deciding what's important, like the grandkids you guys were just talking about.
Well, a lot of it is. So decide what's important. Grandkids, are you going to travel? We love to travel. Or are you going to do the honeydews? What is it that you're going to do when you don't go to work every day? So a lot of people come to see us, Jennifer, and they'll say, okay, I'm tired of my job. And you always have this one phrase. It's don't go away from something, go to something when you're looking at retirement.
When you're making a decision, right.
Yeah.
Don't run away from something, run to something that you want to do.
Right. So kind of teeing it up and saying, what do you want? Now, retiring early is always a big deal. People say, can I go now? And if you don't have a baseline to measure from, if you don't have something that says, I'm wanting this much income, then it's hard to do that measurement. So what you need to do is say, how much do I need? If you've thought about it, there's the stuff you have to have, and then there's stuff you want to have when you look at cash flow in your future.
So, we deal with retirement planning day in and day out, and there are certain key questions that as you're leading up to retirement, your retirement will go much more successfully, and you'll have more peace of mind if you thought about these things. One, like you said, was deciding what's important. Do we retire early and live on less? Do we retire later and live on more? What are we going to be doing in retirement? Do we want to leave a financial legacy? And Craig, you're going into the next question, and that is knowing your numbers, right? Yep. How much, So let's talk about knowing certain numbers that people really should be thinking about.
Well, when you have paychecks, let's say that you put money in the 401k, you pay for the insurance, you get the taxes out of the way, and what shows up in the checking account, do you just spend it? Well, that's what you're spending on now. That's the lifestyle that you're living now. Is it going to be the same thing when you retire? And the answer a lot of times is really it is. Mm-hmm. We had a doctor a long time ago. He says, I make $800,000 a year. And I'm like, well, good for you. And he said, we can retire on $150,000. And I laughed at him. I said, you can't do it. And he kind of got offended. He said, I can't. I said, try try it for 3 months. About a month and a half in, he goes, yeah, we're going to have to readjust our income goal because we couldn't live on that amount.
They couldn't be that skinny, right?
Yeah, right. So how much will you spend in retirement? We have to peg a number. We can always work around a number, but at least let's make something up. I want $120,000 after taxes, and I want that to go up with inflation. We'll put an inflation number on it. Now we've got something that we can measure around because we know what we need to live on every year, and it kind of leads into the next question: how much money do you have? Do you have enough to do it? Do you have cash flow items that pay part of that for you? So Social Security is the easy one to think about. I'd say almost everyone has a Social Security check. So, okay, how much is that going to be at 62, at 67? How much is that going to be at 70? Which one of those are we going to do? We come up with a cash flow. Are you lucky enough to still have a pension from a company you work for? Most people, the answer is no now. It was yes 30 years ago.
And on that pension, when you make those decisions on pension, are you going to do just a single life, joint life, and looking at that decision as well?
Yeah, it's not just I have a pension. I agree. And do you have other income? So we have rental income from real estate that we do. What's that cash flow? How consistent is it? Can you look at it? So out of that example I had of 120,000, let's say that you had 85 of it nailed. Okay, that's pretty cool. But we need to cover the rest of it, that income gap, and the growth that it will have to keep up with for maybe 20, 30 years. So that's a sort of important number or set of numbers that you need to know. And then you need to look at your investments and say, how stable are they? Are they sort of easygoing, and when things go bad, they don't go very bad, and when things are going good, they do pretty darn good? Or are they up and down and have a lot of volatility to it? So these are things that, as you're starting to do your planning, knowing your numbers. And that's something that when you come to see us at the office, we help you to quantify. For a lot of people, they've never done that before.
No,
it's
and we have a tool, actually. If you are kind of in that same boat as Craig's saying, well, I know what I'm spending now, but what is it going to look like in retirement? We have a worksheet that kind of boils it down to, this is what you're currently spending, and then you can transfer it over to the other side and maybe add additional expenses on the retirement side to kind of see where you're going and what those expenses are. That's the hardest number for people to peg.
Yep.
People can pull their assets together. They can what their fixed streams of income are going to be, and they can see what a gap is. But the question is,
what
do you start with? Right. Again, we're talking about retirement planning, and if you're in the ages between 55 and 65 leading up to retirement, this is setting you up for success, things for you to think about. We decide what's important, know your numbers. What about, the big elephant in the room, and that's healthcare costs?
Yeah. Well, you had a number. I think it was the average person that retires today will spend another $260-some thousand for health care in some form or fashion. And you go, how is that? I have Medicare. Well, you need to understand what Medicare does and does not cover, first of all, and also how much does it cost. For example, have you heard of Aunt Irma? So Aunt Irma is that Part B Medicare premium that you'll have to pay. So if you're a big wage earner and you roll into retirement and you turn your Medicare on, you're expecting $170, $180 a month in Medicare Part B cost, and it's way more. I mean, like a whole lot more. And you're going, do I get more for what I pay for? And the answer is no. So understanding what those other costs are. Same thing for what's not covered by Medicare. For example, if you have some prescription drugs, you have to go and beg for them to cover. Are you going to be able to do, I don't know a real example for that, Jennifer, do you?
I don't. And I know that Medicare is changing a lot this coming year. Open enrollment and all that's going to be occurring October 1 to the end of the year. If you don't already, have a Medicare insurance provider, I would suggest, give us a call. We can, put you in touch with one that we would recommend. But things are going to be changing, and some cost structures are going to be changing on the Medicare piece at 65 and above.
Yeah, so. The insurance that you will end up buying, that's sort of what we're getting to. Do you work towards the Advantage plan? Do you have something? And I'm saying this to a very small group of people. Is your employer going to cover your insurance cost in retirement? And then, of course, if you do the supplements, you've got to decide, do I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? There are 10 choices, I think. And so which one of these things will I do? And why would I do one over another? And lastly, the big one is long-term care. Everybody hates the topic. Right. So what do I do if I get sick and I need help at home, help in a facility of some sort? Do I have enough money to pay for it?
Right.
Well, that's a measurement. We can show you that based on some set numbers that we can put into analysis to say, okay, here's what that would cost in addition to maybe your spouse living at home and still having to pay those bills as well. Let's take a look. Can I afford to pay that out of pocket, or do I need to shift that risk over to an insurance company? It's not a fun conversation for me, but a lot of people have had experience. Look in your family and say, who do I know that's had dementia? Who do I know that had to go into some form of long-term care? And then stop and ask yourself, could we handle another $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year in cost over and above what the regular lifestyle would be?
Right.
And that's sort of get a handle on healthcare. Once we understand what's in front of us, then it's easier to make a decision.
And the last thing really that you're thinking about, you've kind of set your parameters and, what are you going to live on, what cash flows you have coming in. You've thought about the healthcare issue, whether you're going to self-insure or seek, an insurance carrier's assistance in covering those costs. But then you got to realize things change over time. You're going to be in retirement, hopefully 20 to 30 years, right? So how are things going to change? Look back the last 20 to 30 years, how things have changed. Well, the cost of living has changed is one thing. So you need to factor that into your plan, that cost of living change, because you don't want your lifestyle to diminish because you can only spend a certain, dollar amount now. And so then, it doesn't cover as much fun or necessities going into the future. So you need to build that inflation in. We're going to get into how things change after break when you're looking at planning for retirement. But during break, use this time, give us a call at 833-RETIRE-WELL, 833-RETIRE-WELL. Give us a call, set time on our calendar so we can talk and make sure that you are preparing yourself for the retirement that you deserve. Our number again, 833-RETIRE-WELL. You're listening to Craig Moser, a certified financial advisor, and Jennifer Moser, a SEPA advisor. When we get back, we're going to finish up this and also talk about things that are hitting the what do you say, the news cycle? The search engine.
Yeah.
And answer some of those questions, because if it's hitting the search engine, you probably have that question as well.
And as always, if you got questions, need help, please reach out to them before you take any action on something you hear on our show or any other, and see how it works with you specifically for your unique situation. And you can do so online at maestrowealth.com. That's maestrowealth.com, where there's a lot of good tools, tips, and resources there that you can check out. Subscribe to the podcast version of the show. Check out their YouTube channel. Get on the newsletter. Lots of good content there at maestrowealth.com, or just call 833-RETIRE-WELL. That's 833-RETIRE-WELL. We're going to pick up our conversation again where we're talking about some things to think about between the ages of 55 and 65. And Jennifer, you kind of teed up a little bit that understanding that needs are going to change over time. You touched on a few of those, but change is hard, right? We kind of like status quo. And sometimes
they don't realize too. I mean, you're starting retirement and you're feeling very healthy, right? So you're probably going to, build in some fun, do some things, but potentially health will change, your mobility will change, your cost structure is going to change in that regard. Craig, and I know you had some comments about expecting change.
I mean, I see it all the time. When you first go into retirement, like you said, your body says yes to travel, to going on hikes and doing all this sort of stuff, but as you age, maybe not. So don't wait too long. So looking at that and over time, you might slow down a little bit. Your mother didn't forever. I mean, she went and traveled until she was, 92?
Yep.
And it was pretty great. But as your body ages, you've got to say, all right, I'm probably not going to be as active as I was. And so plan accordingly. It seems like they call it the retirement smile. I don't know who made that up, but in the beginning, you might spend a little more money on activities and travel and things that you did. But as you reach maybe the mid to late 70s, probably not spending as much on that because been there, did that, and maybe the body's not real anxious to go on and hike a mountain in Utah or something. And then as you get older, expenses might increase as you have health issues. So you have to sort of understand nothing's set in stone. It will change over time, and you have to have some flexibility money to make sure that this works right. Same thing with healthcare cost. As you get older, it'll probably cost more. My father lived until 97, and I made the joke to him one time. I said, "You talk about all your friends based on which doctor you see that day." And he started laughing. He said, "Yeah, I know a lot of those people because I see them all the time as he got older." So that.
Other things change is inflation. I mean, things are going to cost more going forward, so you need to build that into the plan. And that's what we do when we actually sit down with you and create your retirement, is that we do create and put that inflation factor in there to make sure your standard of living does not suffer as you age.
So how about where you're going to live? Right now we have this house that accommodated 4 kids and us and 3 dogs and all this other stuff. And we go back and forth. Are we going to live in this size house the rest of our lives? So far the answer is yes, but it might be no somewhere in the future. So how is that going to happen? Is it going to be more expensive where you live? Will you end up in one of these facilities where you basically buy in and get an apartment and then, you move to a different level of care as you get older if you need it? How's inflation going to impact your income streams? A lot of people say, well, I've got enough coming in right now, Social Security, maybe in a pension, but if things cost more in the future, and they will. I mean, look at the cost of food, look at the cost of healthcare, look at the cost of anything over the last 5 years, and that it was cheaper 5 years ago. I can't really put my finger on a single thing that cost less today than it did then. Maybe, but I don't think I can think of one.
It'd be hard to think of, yeah.
So we have to have some money that's invested for inflation. You just can't put it in a CD. You can't rely just on your fixed income pieces. You have to have some money invested in things that will inflate, so you will have inflated money later.
It sounds like a lot of things to think about for retirement, and yes, there are a lot of things to think about. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and we don't sugarcoat it on the show, but we have a process to walk you through to create a retirement plan so that you have confidence in and that can sustain you during those years. Hopefully, they're supposed to be golden years, right, for you to enjoy all the fruits of your labor. If you have not met with a financial advisor to create your retirement plan or even think about your retirement plan, there is no time like the future to get started. We talk about 55 to 65, and that's the reason why is because if you have a long time, you can have some course correction, you can have some, make some decisions and things to get you set up for that day you decide that you're going to retire and you're going to create a lifestyle on what you've saved. And we want you to be successful. Our number again is 833-RETIRE-WELL. 833-RETIRE-WELL. We're Maestro Wealth Advisors, and we serve the Piedmont from 2 offices, Winston-Salem and also our Greensboro office. Craig, let's move to, we kind of said, what are people asking? Well, we know people when they come into our shop, what they're asking, but we just did a universal search to see if that's kind of where other people are, where their heads are at. I don't think these are in any particular order, but we said, what are people asking about investments and savings and financial topics? One was, how should portfolios be diversified in today's new market regime, Craig?
Well, inflation eats away most of your fixed income. Let's face it, if you don't have enough money earning above the inflation rate, then you're probably going broke safely, putting it in a CD as an example and then paying taxes on it. So interest rates are just not as sticky. And then how do stocks and bonds react? In a empirical world, the way I was trained, in finance, when stocks went up, bonds went down. And when stocks went down, bonds went up. So when you look at that, is that true? So go back to 2022. Did that happen? No. Bonds went down, stocks went down, everything went down. Mm-hmm. So if they don't have that negative correlation, if they don't act differently, what do you do? So you have to have a little more hands on the throttle, if you will, when the market does what it does, because now people can hit one little button and they can sell it all. So it's not like it was back in the 80s or the 70s. That computer makes it very easy for somebody to exit everything very quickly, and that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right way to do it. It just means it is what it is.
And that's the market, your environment that you're dealing with.
Yeah. So there's things that we can use. So there's a broad brush word called alternatives, but those are things like private equity. That sounds like, ooh, danger, but it's not. We're just buying companies that aren't traded publicly on the market. Private equity. And then you can do private debt. So we're lending to companies that aren't on the New York or S&P 500 stock exchange. We're able to get access to other places that our money can work for us rather than the traditional buy the S&P 500 and a bond portfolio, from Vanguard or whatever. Things you can do to not have everything acting the same way at the same time. Obviously the traditional approaches of international need to be there, large, mid, and small stock categories, those types of things. But, you have to think a little out of the box and make sure that you have things that have some downside protection and then either pay you above what the traditional market rates would be or have the ability to go up maybe a little higher than, what the markets would be if that indeed happens.
Interesting, Craig. One of the questions that came up that people are queuing into their Google is, what role should alternative investments play in my portfolio? The private equities, the private estate, private credit, which you just hit on. Mm-hmm. And we've had a couple of webinars dealing with the private equity side of things to educate you, the listener, and our current clients on what are these mechanisms, why would they even be interested in them, how do they work, that kind of thing.
Right.
So if you are interested in understanding a little bit more about what is a private equity, what is a private credit, how does it fit into my portfolio, give us a call at 833-RETIRE-WELL, 833-RETIRE-WELL, and we can sit down with a one-on-one or tell you when our next webinar is going to be on that particular topic. Before we finish up, what about this last question that came up? Are traditional valuations high? And should I be worried about overpaying for equities, Craig?
Yeah.
It's all high.
Things are crazy high. If you look at a chart of the S&P, the Dow, if you look at Europe, Australia, and the Far East, if you look at emerging markets, the valuation, which is basically the price we pay for those stocks, are at all-time highs. All-time, never been higher than this, all-time highs as a group.
Don't you think it's because there's so much
money,
cash into the system, and it's got to go somewhere?
All these countries printed all this cash. We could have another conversation about that, but if that money's going to go somewhere, and right now it's going into the things that it can inflate, and that's the stock market and honestly the real estate market. So ask yourself a question. At what point will people not pay a higher price? Now that's when things correct. I mean, seriously, at some point on a piece of real estate, you'll say no, right? I know you will. So, we might as well look at it and say, how do we manage this? And it means that, again, you have to have your hands on the throttle to make sure that you're not always in the left lane going as fast as you can. Sometimes you might have to slow down or get off the interstate. It's a terrible analogy, but it's the only one I've got. And that means that you have to make changes in these portfolios as the world in front of you begins to change some. Right now, it's let's go.
Right.
But that could change very quickly, and you need to have the ability to understand or work with someone that knows, hey, it's time to back this thing off.
So maybe a set it and forget it is not the right approach at this time, or could come and bite you potentially?
Well, you read that a lot. So, we can put it in the indexes at Vanguard, and we pay virtually nothing on a fee. Why wouldn't we do that? And that's a good idea when things are going up. But you can look back at different points in time, like 2022, they did not. So if that were something that was sustained for a long period of time, if you think about 2000 to 2010, that was a lost decade. We didn't make any money that decade. So you have to have a strategy that works in different environments.
And I think it's important to have that dialogue with your financial advisor and not just have, you hitting that conversation. It should be, if you don't have that one-on-one conversation with your advisor, you don't feel comfortable talking with him or her, or they're not reaching out to you, that might be an indication that you need to get a second opinion and get someone who's more active in your account and invested in your future, so to speak. So not to badmouth anybody, but if you feel like you need more attention, then maybe it's now the time to look for that attention. That's what we do here at Maestro Wealth Advisors. Love to sit down with you, understand your situation, get to know your family and your affairs to see if we can be able to help you and be of service to you. If you're not ready to make that call to 833-RETIRE-WELL and set that time up, no worries. Go to our website, maestrowealth.com. Check out the website. We have some resources there that might answer some of your questions in the meantime. But otherwise, thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking with you next week.
We'll see you next time here on How Money Works with the team from Maestro Wealth Advisors, 833-RETIRE WELL. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. If you have any questions about what we've discussed, remember, you can get a complimentary financial review with the team at Maestro Wealth Advisors by calling 833-RETIRE WELL, or go online to howmoneyworksradio.com for other great resources and ways to reach the team. You can also check the show notes of today's episode for our contact information as well. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all the most popular apps. For Craig and Jennifer Moser, I'm Mark Killian. We'll talk to you next time on the How Money Works podcast.
Securities offered through Cetera Wealth Services, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Cetera Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity.